Hello, and welcome to the Los Angeles Public Library NaNoWriMo Teen Writers Group. I'm Amanda Charles, a young adult librarian at Teenscape, the library within the Los Angeles Public Library's Central Library that is just for young people ages 12 to 19. I'd like to introduce my colleagues in this series, Neil Citrin, who is here with us today, a YA librarian at the Abbott Kinney Memorial Branch in Venice, and also the co-founder of the Greater Los Angeles Writers Society. And now with us today is Emily Meehan, YA librarian at Palms Rancho Park branch, where she not only runs the Palms Rancho Park Teen Creative Writing Club for young people ages 11 to 18, but also an amazing Dungeons and Dragons game as well. Thanks so much for the support of our generous donors, the Lenore F. and Bernard A. Greenberg Fund and the Library Foundation of Los Angeles. Every Monday in November, we are talking writing, sometimes in teens-only Zoom meetings, and other times, like today, in live stream author talks and panels that everyone can attend. Today is our genre author panel. We're talking about genre in popular fiction, what it is, and how you write it, with three amazing writers who have written different genres in their careers. I'd like to thank our authors for participating in today's panel and introduce them to you. First up is Henry Leanne. Henry introduces himself as a speculative fiction writer, but also admits that speculative fiction is a fancy way to say science fiction and fantasy without sounding like too much of a nerd. His middle grade novels, Peace Sprout Chen, Future Legend of Skate and Sword from 2018, and Peace Sprout Chen, Battle of Champions from 2019, relate the eponymous heroine's adventures mastering the lamentably fictional art of Wu Liu, a combination of kung fu and figure skating. Seriously, why doesn't Wu Liu exist in real life? Hopefully we will discuss that in our discussion today. Next up is Mary Mccoy, a writer and a librarian at the Los Angeles Public Library. She is the author of a 2019 Prince Honor book, I, Claudia, a young adult reimagining of the classic historical novel, I, Claudius. She's also the genre-hopping Camp So-and-So and the YA young adult Los Angeles noir mystery, Dead to Me. Lastly, we have Cherry Thomas, USA Today best-selling author. She decided that her goal in life is to write every kind of book she enjoys reading. Thus far, she has published romance, fantasy, mystery, and a wuxia-inspired duology. Her books regularly receive starred reviews and Best of the Year honors from trade publications, including such outlets as the New York Times and National Public Radio. She's also a two-time winner of the Romance Writers of America prestigious Rita Award. Her young adult novels include the fantasy Elementals trilogy, including The Burning Sky, The Perilous Sea, and The Immortal Heights. Her most recent young adult novel is The Magnolia Sword, a Ballad of Milan. So thank you so much, authors, for being here today. We will start off with some general discussion of writing and genre. Live stream viewers, please be aware you can use the comments to ask questions, and we will relay them to our authors later in the program. And now I'd like to turn it over to Neil.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, a little bit about genre. The dictionary definition of genre is pretty broad. A category of artistic, musical, or literary composition characterized by a particular style, form, or content. Today, we're asking about genre in popular fiction, and you probably know the names of some popular genres like mystery novels, in which the mystery is revealed or a crime is solved, fantasy novels, which take place in a world where magic is possible, romance, where a love story unfolds and ends happily, science fiction, which features plausible or wholly imagined worlds or future worlds where the science of today is taken into logical or illogical extremes. So I'm going to start with some opening questions. I'd like to ask each author to please tell us about your most recent book, or what elements of your story and style make it a part of a genre. And why don't we start with Henry, if you're on top.
My current series of books is called Peace Sprout Chen, and they are an upper middle grade fantasy about a young girl and her little brother who leave their homeland to come to a new country to study at a boarding school that teaches a very unusual sport, combining figure skating with kung fu.
That is the coolest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, that is kind of cool. Thank you. Sherry, next.
My most recent young adult work is The Magnolia Sword, which is a retelling of the original Ballad of Milan. And it combines, I guess, Chinese folklore with a much later Chinese genre, which is that of wuxia, the martial arts epic. And I also write for the adult audience a gender-bending Sherlock Holmes historical mystery series called the Lady Sherlock. Well, the Lady Sherlock books. So they basically posit that the actual Sherlock Holmes was that Sherlock Holmes is a fictional construct based on the real-life exploits of a woman named Charlotte Holmes in Victorian England.
That sounds like fun.
Very cool.
Yeah. And last, Mary.
So my most recent novel is I, Claudia, which is a YA contemporary retelling of the Robert Graves novel I, Claudius. And it's also kind of a political thriller. So it's this teenage girl who is trying to stop her high school from being overrun by autocrats and fascists. It was also inspired by the 2016 election.
I have actually listened to all of I, Claudius on audio as an audiobook back when you can only get them as cassettes from the library.
Wow.
And then there's the 70s TV series. A lot of people, I think, who are my age saw when they were too young to see it. And
so when I read your book, I'll be very interested to know who is Livia and who she poisons.
Okay, well, specific to what we're doing this month, have you ever participated in NaNoWriMo? And if so, how was your experience? Let's go in reverse order, start with Mary.
I owe NaNoWriMo like everything. I did my first NaNoWriMo in 2010. And at that point, I'd always wanted to be a writer, but I had never finished anything. And even though at the end of that experience, I didn't have like a novel I could get published. Like it was not a good novel, but I had that experience of sitting down every single day and developing a writer's practice and finishing something, like actually typing the words at the end. So like I'm doing NaNoWriMo right now. I don't do like 1,667 words every day. But I always try to do like a big push on a writing project every November.
Excellent. I should, for the purposes of our audience, I suppose most people probably do know, but NaNoWriMo stands for National Novel Writing Month, and the basic challenge is to write a minimum of 50,000 words for that month of November. And I also participated. I'm woefully behind this month, but I'm pushing forward with it to the best of my ability. Sherry?
I have tried NaNoWriMo once. I am, for one thing, not a very fast writer. For another thing, I am not a, I have no idea where the book goes after the next 3 scenes. So combine those two qualities together, it does not make a very good fit for NaNoWriMo. The one time I tried, I had to stop after 20 days because I had completely lost track of where this book was headed. It was a mystery. So on the mystery front, I was still sort of okay. But on the emotional front, there was supposed to be a huge development in 2 characters' relationship. And because I was just writing as fast as I could, I had no idea what they were supposed to do anymore. So I basically, when I hit that point, I had to stop and go back and rewrite and layer everything in. So it did help me get some words, but I also had to throw out a bunch of those words to rework the book. So I have never been the best candidate for NaNoWriMo.
That's something the Nano is actually pretty good for. It kind of gives you a good sense of, like, it gets you to get the words out, and then you can kind of have to throw most of it out anyway. So, Henry?
I have not done NaNoWriMo. I am a big believer in experimenting to find out how your creative process is structured. And NaNoWriMo is very specific. For those of you who are doing it, bravo and bravo to you. It takes a huge commitment to do that. And I think that whatever result you get out of something like NaNoWriMo, one of the benefits is that you get a sense of community. And that's a rare thing for writers because we are generally working in solitude. To know that other people, hundreds, thousands of people across the country are doing this at the same time, going through the same doubts and the struggles that you are going through, that helps. That means something. And just the gesture of sacrificing so much of your year to this one task, that also is very important in building up particular muscles that will be good for you as a writer. That said, I think it's important to take any kind of writing exercise like NaNoWriMo with some perspective, and know that it's not one size fits all. Like Sherry was just saying, there are some writers for whom this would not be the right process. I'm a big believer that you're not only writing when you are typing words. I believe that you are writing when you are researching, thinking, even just living your life, because that's the material that ends up in your novel organically. And to focus just on producing words, I think that the danger with that is to denigrate the parts of writing which do not necessarily produce words at the end of the day. So I would say for everybody entering into this, if you are feeling I'm not keeping up with the word count like everybody else is posting about on their Instagram, or I don't like the words that I'm posting, this is just an exercise in finding out what your process is. Maybe your process is that you spend a year dreaming about the book and then it just plops out of you because it has been formed. Use this as an opportunity to learn about yourself rather than produce something that you necessarily want to be putting out into the world. Said the guy that's never done NaNoWriMo.
There you go. Well, you have to have your experience with it. Okay, and the last question on kind of the general questions is: do you have any advice for teens who want to get started writing? Sherry, why don't you take that one?
I always tell aspiring writers to read. Read the best book in whatever genre, subgenre, or just kind of book that you like to write. I think you should find the best possible book, be kind of overawed by it, and then pick yourself up and say, I am aiming for that. And the second thing, especially I think for teens, is that writing is actually a long game. There are very few instantaneous successes, either in terms of just writing your first manuscript or selling your first book or making a living at it right away. And even if you achieve one or all of these milestones all at once, you don't know what the future holds either. Like I said, so writing is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So it goes beyond NaNoWriMo, and it goes beyond 1 year or even 10 years. So pace yourself, have fun, live your life, and write on the side. What?
Neil, you are muted.
I muted myself. Right. Whichever of the two of you wants to go next.
I mean, a lot of what I was going to say is just what Henry said and what Sherry said. That's such great advice. I think I would also say, yeah, I don't get too hung up on word counts. For me, trying to write like 1,667 words every day, that's just not going to work. But making a daily practice of it, I find to be very valuable. And so it doesn't matter how many words you write when you sit down. Just, I think the act of sitting down, even if it's only for 15 minutes a day, or not even every day, 15 minutes a few times a week, just building up those writing muscles. Like writing, it's just like anything else. The more you do it, the more, the better you get at it, and the easier it gets.
Echoing what Sherry said, I think it's important. I mean, there's the advice that reading bad writing helps teach you to be a good writer. I don't agree with that, frankly. I think that reading good books and trying to understand why they impacted you with the way that they did is very helpful, though. And one way to do that, like Sherry said, is to read books that you admire and that you were awed by. But I would suggest that you actually sit down and outline the book chapter for chapter, every plot thread that is happening. Look and see how it is woven in, so you can get a sense of the architecture of the book. That will give you an idea of the kind of engineering required to build a good book. Yes, there has to be great substance, but the craft of building a book is a very specific skill. And I found it personally very fruitful to sit down and map out a book that I admire to see how they did this. Mystery books puzzle stories are particularly fun to map out because you see that the clues to the final solution have been seeded throughout at regular intervals. And so it leaves you a little bit intimidated at the amount of work required to build a good plot, but it also gives you a bit of a roadmap to see how those effects are achieved. I would also suggest for young writers to invest a lot of time in choosing the right concept to write. Aim for the concept that you have not seen before and that is unique and that you can write and make a unique contribution with. And there are some easy ways to do that. I believe in books that are personal. And so if you got a number of things that you like, that you are passionate about, that you're drawn to, and that you want to write, think about just combining 2 or more of them in one concept, because instantly you've differentiated yourself from everybody else out there. There probably are very few people that have come up with the exact same combination of 2 or 3 ideas that you've come up with. And once you do that, you're suddenly not competing with anybody else out there. I mean, you might be really interested in fairies and in changeling stories, and you might have written the best fairy changeling story in the world, but you're competing with all the other outstanding fairy changeling stories out there. Well, if you got the fairy changeling story that is also about gymnastics or something, because you're interested in both, I guarantee you you're not going to be competing with a whole lot of other books about fairy changeling gymnasts. And then you've got to grow that concept in a way that feels real. But I would say invest in the brainstorming stage of writing to choose the right concept that is unique to you, personal to you, going to be fun to write, and combines things together that other people haven't, because they're the things that you in particular like and that make you special.
You mean like figure skating in Kung Fu?
I totally mean like figure skating in Kung Fu.
Perfect. Perfect. It was interesting what you said. The first thing that you said about breaking down, I'm doing that right now, except that I'm doing it with short stories. I'm going through like collections of short stories and breaking down how they work so that I can better apply them to whatever it is that I'm trying to do, because I tend to lean towards short fiction anyway. So
let me just say a word. Some people, people's brains are built differently.
Right.
Some people, we're all ditch diggers in this career. Writing is very much like ditch digging in a lot of ways. It's just a lot of hard, unrewarding work that go into it along the way before you have this beautiful ditch, I guess. But everybody's brain works differently. I, for one, have never been able to take quite the same engineering approach, like take a book, break it down into its parts and see how it's put together. And correspondingly, when I write mystery novels, and I think I write fairly intricately woven mystery novels, I reverse engineer my books in the sense that what I understand is not so much how a book is put together, but how a book should read like. So I will go say, I want some excitement here. Oh, I think the tension should pick up here. Or I think there's a secret I need to go in here that will make it more interesting. And then later, I go and figure out what the secret is and what so and so. So you can approach building a book in various different ways. Like in case your brain is not built to how did Henry put it, to break it all down. Right. Like in very detailed manner. Yeah.
Ditch digging, indeed.
Yeah, Sherry, that's like, I agree with you. That's how I write as well. My first book was a mystery novel, and it was the biggest relief to realize I didn't have to be clever on the first draft.
Right.
I could get to the end of the book and then figure out all the places.
Back and put everything that things need to be in.
Yeah.
Exactly. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to get into some author-specific questions. I've got a bunch of them. My colleague Amanda will keep an eye on the time, and also for any questions that anybody else happens to have that you can throw in. You can stop me at any point. Okay, so the first one is for Mary. Your novel, Camp So-and-so, contains several stories within the story, skipping across various genres. What drew you to write the story, and what challenges did you face in telling it?
So, yeah, that novel, Camp So-and-so, it's a summer camp book, but there are 5 cabins, at this summer camp, and one of them is kind of the like rivalry with the rich, cool kids at the better camp across the lake. And one of the cabins, their story is like kind of a Friday the 13th being chased by a, you know, axe murderer through the woods. And then there's like one cabin that has like the summer romance story. So there's a little bit of everything. And I really just did it to see if I could. And I wanted to write a summer camp book, and it was the hardest book I ever wrote. And I vowed to myself I would never try anything like that again. But part of the writing process that's really interesting to me is with every novel, just to give myself a little bit of a reach, like just to try something that I'm not entirely sure if I can pull it off or not.
Okay, excellent. Okay, Sherry, this one's for you. In your book, Magnolia Sword, A Ballad of Milan, you noted that you decided to approach a simple folktale through the lens of China's wuxia genre. Did I pronounce that right again?
Wuxia, yeah.
Wuxia. Okay. Can you tell us more about wuxia and the ways you crafted your Milan story to match this genre?
Wuxia basically is a quintessentially Chinese genre of literature that deals with the doings, the lives, the private loves and hates, heartbreaks of martial artists who are so good they're almost supernatural in their abilities. And I grew up on the stuff, consuming as books, TV, movies, so on and so forth. Because I'm a Chinese immigrant, I didn't come to this country until I was 13, and I have always loved wuxia, and I always want to write more of it in English. And when I was asked to write a young adult version of the Ballad of Mulan, I actually went and read the original Ballad of Mulan, and turned out it was only like, I don't know, 140 characters or some such. It's like super short, and it tells you nothing of what she did the whole time she was in the military. Like, it spends more time on her preparation to leave and what happened after she came back. And then the rest was just condensed into 4 lines that she was there. And so I thought, okay, so to write Mulan, I basically have to build a whole world. And what kind of world do I like to build? I like to build martial arts world. So this is exactly like Henry talked about. You write something you are interested in. I love writing about people who are great at martial arts, and I ask myself, what kind of crazy girl would actually volunteer in somebody else's stead to go to war? Because, if my dad is old and it's his time, I would just be crying in front of the gate and waving my little handkerchief and saying, we'll pray for you, Dad. We'll pray for you, Dad. There's no way I am putting myself into that situation. So I would imagine a girl who would do that, besides having, ovaries of steel, must also have some skills that make her dare to do such a thing, because I will not. I simply would not have this kind of guts without some kind of skill to back me up. I think I would just get myself and my whole family into trouble if I actually went into this kind of situation. So I thought, what would she be? She has to be a martial artist. And so then I threw in some of the fairly common tropes from the martial arts epics I consumed as a child, such as the enmities that last through generations, the fight over priceless swords, and so on and so forth, and add little human elements to that. Martial artists who have been disabled from their great duels, and throw it all together, and it becomes a fun ride.
Excellent. Okay, Henry, your Pea Sprout Chen books famously feature a combination of kung fu and figure skating, as we have discussed. What is the secret to mixing genres? How do you decide what elements to keep and which to leave out?
I don't know if I have a universal secret, but the way that I approached it is that I used to be an attorney, so I believe in research. And when I decided, I just like Sherry was just saying, I came up with this concept for my own enjoyment. And I got very sucked into figure skating because of the Winter Olympics and the way that Olympics coverage is set up, it's all about the human story, and it's so dramatic, and these girls sacrifice so much, and it all comes down to 3 minutes, and all of their sacrifice and suffering can be blown if they mess up those 3 minutes. It's so dramatic. And I got completely sucked into figure skating coverage because of that. We got figure skating. And then I also got very into art house martial arts films, particularly Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which rocked my world so hard I have never gotten over it. And I also went to boarding school, and boarding school was the most traumatic and magical experience of my life. Going in as a gay immigrant person of color, transfer student into the 11th grade. It was a very hard experience, but it was also the best experience of my life, the most traumatic and the most magical. So I call it the most traumatic experience of my life. And I wanted to combine these three things that meant a lot to me and that I thought so much about into one place. But because I believe in doing research, and because I'm not into wacky, and the concept itself was in great peril of sounding wacky, I decided to take 6 months of figure skating and traditional kung fu lessons. And that was a revelation, because I came into them thinking, I'm a pretty fit guy. How hard can this be? Famous last words to ever say, how hard can this be? I was so appalling at figure skating and kung fu. And both equally and in the same way. And there's a reason for that. In figure skating class and in kung fu class, I was literally on my butt in every class while these young people were skating around me like minnows in water, and this young woman who weighed half of my weight, who I could probably bench press with one hand, was pulling off these moves flawlessly while I was literally tearing my hamstring. And it was freaky and frustrating. But what I learned from it is that these two sports that I had just plucked out of the air for a lark were actually all about balance and flexibility more than brute strength. So they were sports that happened to have a family resemblance in that they rewarded the ways that certain bodies are different from other bodies. They rewarded the ways that young kids and women can do things that a grown man cannot do. So I realized I was writing a concept that really was a kid power and a girl power concept. That was my entry into these two things. That was the thing that united them. And I realized I had to step back and give that part of the story its due respect. I was writing something that was about kid power and girl power, and I had to spend a lot of time giving that the respect that it required. So my advice to people is to, part of what a writer does is create things out of thin air, but part of what a writer's contribution to culture is also to look for connections between things that other people haven't seen, and sitting down, investing, researching, living those ideas will help you see some of the ways that they are actually connected that other people might not have seen.
Interesting. That combination that you talk about, I don't feel so bad. No, I get criticized sometimes for combining things like, heavy metal music with the horror genre.
Totally.
And sports. And those are like my three favorite subjects to write about. So it's interesting. Yep. Okay. I'm validated. Excellent. Okay. Next one. Mary. Your novel, Dead to Me, is a young adult mystery with a 1950s Hollywood setting and a classic film noir style. How did you adapt a genre and setting not usually seen in YA to a young adult novel?
I think at the time that I wanted to write it, I didn't know that it would, and I think it's been done a couple of times. Like I can think of a couple of 1940s, 1950s kind of noirish historical mysteries. But at the time, I was really into kind of high school noir type things. Like there was a TV show on called Veronica Mars, and there was also a movie. I think it was Rian Johnson's first movie. It was called Brick, and it was like this Humphrey Bogart type high school character, and I just loved it. And I was like, high school noir makes so much sense, because in film noir, everything is life and death. And when you're just a regular adult, very few things actually feel like that. But I think when you're younger, everything feels quite high stakes. And so I thought combining that with with the noir genre, it went together pretty well. So that was how that came up.
Interesting. Excellent. Okay, Sherry, you've stated your goal in life is to write every kind of book you enjoy reading. Can you tell us about the genres you've written and the genres you enjoy that you have yet to write?
I have written, I mean, I have published in romance, fantasy, mysteries, and obviously in wuxia, and I cannot read horror, and I don't like westerns. So for the longest time, the only thing that was left was science fiction. And then a couple of years ago, I finished and published a science fiction romance novella, which was actually pretty big kind of science fiction on the science fiction end. So I'm done. I'm done. Unless I move to Wu Liu, write Wu Liu books, I'm done with the mainstream genres.
Or you could challenge yourself and write horror if you so choose.
I would need to know what horror is, first of all, since I cannot consume horror. Like, I have a very weak cardiovascular system. Like, when the music starts, boom, 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 my heart actually feels like it's going to jump out, and I literally have to leave the room before my blood vessels explode.
Well, there's all sorts of different types of horror, from the jump out stuff that jumps out at you and scares the crap out of you, to just the really subtle. And I tend to lean more towards the subtler.
Oh, but the subtle ones will scare me even worse, I think.
Yes, yes, yeah, in many ways.
Like, I'm not built to be scared.
I see. Okay. Okay, and the last of those questions. For Henry, your Pea Sprout Chen books are middle grade, that is, novels aimed at readers in middle school and above. How is writing for this audience different from writing for older readers, especially with regard to the elements of genre that might be less familiar to younger readers?
Yeah, I'm really not a good person to ask this because I don't even think about genre. I wrote these. I started writing the Pea Sprout Chen books at a writing workshop called Clarion West. And one of the authors who was a great mentor and supporter was George R.R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones and the series that Game of Thrones comes from. And if you know Game of Thrones, either the HBO show or the books, you know that they are super, super adult. And that's kind of what I was aiming for in writing the series. Even though it featured a 14-year-old protagonist, I thought, oh, well, she's like the Arya of this world. Just because there's a 14-year-old protagonist doesn't mean that it's going to be dumbed down. But then when I submitted to my agent, and an agent is somebody who helps you try to find a publisher, a company to publish your book. When I submitted it to my agent, she said, we're going to submit this as young adult because of the age of the protagonist. And I said, okay, whatever, I leave that to you. And then when my agent sold it to the publisher, which is the company that actually puts the book out into the world, they said, we're going to market this as middle grade. And I kind of, I knew what middle grade meant. It meant up to age 14, essentially. And I kind of crossed my arms and said, okay, well, fine, do whatever you need to. I'm not going to dumb this down. I'm not going to change anything for your audience. And they said, no, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. We think that there's a way to keep everything in there that you want to. All of the very intricate stuff about politics, all of the genderqueer politics as well, the identity politics. You don't have to take any of that out. But my editor, who is the person at the publisher who's kind of in charge of revising the novel with me and also helping me through the process of promoting it, my editor said, there's a deal when you're writing middle grade. Here's the deal. Two things. You can write about the most ambitious, dark, real stuff that you want to, but you have to leave the reader at the end with a little bit of brightness and hope. And I said, okay, that's fine. I can do that. It's harder to write something with brightness and hope at the end of it than it is to write something that's just cynical. And so I said, I can do that. And the other thing was that she said, the more ambitious the material is, you can have all the difficult things you want to in there. But the deal is, the more ambitious it is, the more entertaining it has to be. So the more of the politics you have in there, the more action you have in there to keep people reading and flipping the pages. And I was skeptical about their decision. I considered it a marketing decision, a salesmanship decision. But ultimately, they were right, because The only people that have read my books in 24 hours or one sitting that have emailed me about it were 8 years old. So actually below my target age range. So my publisher knew what they were doing. So I try not to think about any of that at all. But the publishers, the companies that put the books out there have put a lot of thought into this.
Okay.
I like how they put it. I like how they put it.
Yeah.
The more harder stuff, the more entertaining it has to be. Yes.
That sounds good. I like it. I like it. And I enjoy them. I've read both of the books. They're very cool. So Amanda, are you there?
Second.
I think Amanda is there. She is. There you are. So you want to dig into the any audience questions we might have?
Hi again. So yeah, so we have some questions from our audience. So first off, question for everyone. When do you know, this is from a username Ballatosis, when do you know a book is finished in terms of narrative, and when do you know you've reached your final draft in terms of editing?
Oh, I was just touching my hair.
Go ahead, Sherry. Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. For me, I know that I'm done when, like, for me, the perfect ending of a book gives the reader some of the things they wanted, but not all the things they wanted. And so once I have that combination, like kind of a satisfying ratio of not wish fulfillment, but satisfaction, that's when I know that the book can end.
Since we write in genre, if we write in genre, then this is actually a very easy question to answer when you write in genre, because especially in the commercial genres like romance, fantasy, science fiction, mystery, you have to do certain things before your book can end. And then there's no point in your book going on for much longer once you have done these things. So in romance, once they have reached the happily ever after or happily for now, in mystery, once you've solved the case, in science fiction, you save the world. In fantasy, you finish your quest. Once you have done those things, your book is done. There's no point in staying around anymore. So in that way, it is quite easy when you write genre books to know where they're ending. And but if you happen to be writing a series, if your stories are interlinked, then that's a slightly more different problem. I think a mystery series is easier because still in each book in a mystery series, you have a mystery, solve that mystery, and then you can bring that particular installment to an end. I'm not sure where I would demarcate for, say, like a fantasy or science fiction. Probably you have to set up a big enough story question at the beginning of each installment and have dealt with that at the end of that installment.
I think I understood Ballatosis' question a little bit differently, and I understood it to be asking not where the story ends, and I agree with Mary and Sherry regarding where the story ends. I understood the question to be, when do you know you are done revising your manuscript?
The second part of it, yeah.
Okay, if that is the question, I say you go back, you need to sweep your novel for multiple things, but only one thing at a time. So you go through and you say, okay, what about the main character's arc? Am I satisfied with how her arc has progressed? Then go back and look at each major character. You're going to be reading the novel 10 times at least. And then go back and look at the language. Am I happy with how this is working on a prose level? Do I like the language? Go back and look at the dialogue. And only do one thing at a time. Read the entire novel through for only one thing. Sweep for only one element at a time. Go back and see, are the visuals, do I like the visuals? Does it look like I want it to look? Go back for each of these layers. When you are satisfied with each of these layers, then you're probably pretty close to being finished revising. But what I would suggest you not do is read your novel from page 1 to the last page, trying to keep all of these things in mind. Sweep for one thing at a time, read multiple times. When you're satisfied with that your novel is strong on each of these elements, then you're probably ready to share it.
Although that is the ideal approach. That is the ideal approach. Although in real life, writers have deadlines. Sometimes there is simply not enough time to sweep the book in several passes. Like, for example, me, I think I'm a fairly typical deadline writer. I write to my deadlines. Like, there's not a minute to spare. Sometimes I say in traditional publishing, you do multiple drafts through, and by the time your manuscript goes to copy edit, typically you're supposed to be done with the majority of your revision at that point. So when the copy edit come back to you, you just look at what the copy editor point out, like is there continuity errors, is there grammatical errors, and so on and so forth. But I will often, not often, less often than before, I have basically switched the book in its entirety in copy edit. Like rewritten the book 50, 60, 70%. Like so that the book that came into me and the book that went back in copy edit is completely different. So then I only have time in galleys, which is the next stage, when the pages are already set on paper and everything has to be done by hand, to catch typos and to make any further changes I want. Then you really have to do everything at one go. There's no time to check everything individually. You just have to like cross your fingers and hope you got everything done. That's how the Henry, I hope you can do that for every one of your books. I have never been able to do that for any of my books.
Well, that's the beauty of being in the situation that a lot of our audience probably is in. You are writing right now without those external pressures. Everybody dreams of being a writer, making their living from writing. But there's a beautiful thing about this time right now, and that is you can polish your book to the highest polish that you feel comfortable with. There is nobody forcing you to put it out there before you're entirely comfortable with it. That time will pass, like Sherry was saying. And so
if you're lucky, that time will pass. I hope you have multiple publishers breathing down your neck, hollering for your next book, so that you only have to.
That's awesome. And on that note, we have a question from another person in the audience. How many of you started writing as a teen? And if so, what did you write when you were a teen?
I was a poet. It's funny, I ran into a friend of mine from college, actually. But I wrote poetry the whole time through high school and college. And I only took poetry classes. I've actually never taken a fiction class. And she only took fiction classes. And now she's a poet and I'm a novelist.
I did not write in my teens. I did not write until all of a sudden I was 23 and decided to write. That's why I say it's a long game. Even if you you don't publish your first book, you don't finish your first manuscript in your teens, there's a long time to go yet.
You can come to writing at any stage.
Sorry?
I was just saying you can come to writing at any stage. You don't have to be a young person. You can come to writing when you're 90 years old and write an amazing book.
I completely agree with that. I did not write as a teenager. I did not even think about writing until I was a 42-year-old middle-aged man with a receding hairline. But there's an advantage to that. And I say this, I don't want all of you to be 42 and have a receding hairline before you really take this seriously. But for those of you who are thinking, I haven't done anything, for those of you who are not teenagers and you think, I haven't gotten any closer to my goal, as I said before, I fully believe that gathering life experience is also writing, because you are amassing material to write about. And I spent the first half of my life living, and I've had an interesting life. I'm going to spend the second half of my life writing about the experiences and the feelings that I lived in the first half. I will never run out of things to write about. That is a great feeling, to know I am never going to be sitting at the blank page, looking at the blank page and not know what to write, because I've spent 42 years amassing things to write about. There is the phrase that a life unexamined is not worth living, but I think the flip side can also be true. A life unlived is not worth examining. So if you haven't really lived, and you don't really have anything to write about, don't worry about it. Go and live. Go and do something difficult that you're afraid of. Go and join a protest. Go and talk to somebody who you don't think you have anything in common with. Go and live, and you will be writing in the process of living. You will have things to write about.
That is awesome, and it kind of segues into our next audience question, which is, how do you get over writer's block? And so would your answer, Henry, be to live? Or do you have other techniques?
Absolutely. I think, as I said before, it's very important to understand your own creative process. And I've got 3 things that work for me. They might not work for you, but one thing is exercise. Doing some kind of exercise that does not require counting of repetitions, for some reason, is magic to me. I can set out on my power walk. I live near a cemetery, and I do a power walk every morning. At the beginning of the power walk, I say, I pose to myself some thorny plot problem I haven't been able to solve. Invariably, by the end of that 45-minute power walk, that answer has come to me as like a gift from the sky. So that works. That's one thing that works for me. Another thing is research. I am a big believer in research. Research the topic that you're writing about. The world is a fascinating place if we decide it's going to be. So stop trying to force ideas onto the page and go out there and research. And then the last part is to live a little bit. Go and engage in the thing that you are writing about. Go and actually take figure skating or kung fu lessons. You might find that it's going to write half of your story for you. But what I don't think is productive for the majority of writers is to just force words onto the page when you are feeling guilty because everybody else in NaNoWriMo is posting their word counts. That's not productive, and it's usually going to result in words that you just have to delete later on. So invest time in finding out how your own creativity is wired, because people are different.
Cool.
Yeah, I always like to pay attention to whatever it is that I'm obsessed with at that point in time. And it's always something different. I feel like by the time I've finished writing a book, I've gotten that interest out of my system, and I've moved on to something else. So if I ever get stuck, I just sit down and I think about like what holds my interest right now. The book that I have coming out next summer, I was really interested in podcasts and I wanted to learn more about that. I was really interested in breakups, and I wanted to write books about characters who were going through a lot of messy breakups. And I wanted to write like a love story because I'd never really done that before. And so like I kind of put all those elements together, and a place I was interested in and a hobby I was interested in, and just finding all those different things and threading them together, suddenly I had a story.
I don't think that I've actually had writer's block per se. I have had a lot of writer's reluctance, however. Sometimes the brain just does not want to work. Like my brain does not do too well if I write, say, 2 books a year for 2 years running. It just does not. I don't have lots of friends who can do that, but I have some friends who can comfortably write 4 books a year, and that's just never been my pace. So if I overexert myself, my brain will just shut down on its own. I can open my computer, but I will be doing other things. But while I'm doing other things, while I'm just surfing or playing games, it's just actually my brain resting and gearing up for the next battle. That said, because I am a writer with deadlines, sometimes I have people breathing down my neck saying, when is the manuscript coming in? While my brain is still resting. So sometimes you have to force your brain to work. It's the same as in any other profession. I think, lawyers, accountants, whatever, they sometimes have to work more than they want to. Writers sometimes have to work more than they want to also. And the good thing is, readers cannot tell. Readers absolutely cannot tell. If you've done your job properly, they absolutely cannot tell whether you loved writing a book or whether you hated writing a book. It is not in the book. It is in your experience, but it's not in the book. My latest Lady Sherlock book, a lot of people were telling me that, I think it's the best in the series. And I'm like, really? I cannot tell you because I barely remember, like my brain was so fried during the writing of it that I just want to forget all about it. But So you can produce good work under conditions in which you don't want to work. You just have to. It's like we talk about the writing muscle, right? During NaNoWriMo, sometimes you're forced to do NaNoWriMo because you're on deadline, whether you want to or not. So that is the same. Your writing muscles get exercised again and again. You're constantly thinking about your story, whether you want or not. So finally, you actually get into your story, whether you love your story or not. And it goes like that. Sometimes it's not, what you love something, it's how much time you spend on something that decides whether it's good or not.
Cool. Okay, so let's see, we have a few more questions from the audience. So from Eric, if you want to write about two different topics that you enjoy but can't think of how to connect them, I guess this goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Henry. Is it worth investing into it, or is it better to think of something else that may connect easier?
I have an exercise. I teach writing as well at UCLA and a couple other places, and I do this exercise where I actually have people. It's a parlor game that an art movement called the Surrealists came up with, and David Bowie used this game to come up with a lot of his song lyrics, and that is to use random words and try to find a connection between them. So what I would do is I would have my students each come up with 3 random words, and then we would scramble them and assign them randomly to another writer. Give them 5 minutes to come up with the most interesting story idea that uses all 3 of the randomly assigned words that they came up with. I would suggest you do that exercise repeatedly. Get a couple of friends together who might not even be writers. Just come up with ideas. I think you need to exercise that particular muscle. What that muscle does is it looks for connections between things that other people aren't seeing. That is, as I said before, a part of what a writer can contribute to culture, and it's a skill that can be developed just by exercising it. So I would say, don't just sit down and say, I want to write about Fortnite, and I also want to write about crows, because those are the 2 things I like. If you don't have the muscle to find the connection between Fortnite and crows, go out and do this exercise a couple of times, and then see if those muscles are developing. And then also do research about Fortnite and crows, because there probably is some kind of connection in there that you're not seeing yet. So to answer your question, I don't believe that any 2 things are ever entirely unrelated. It is just a matter of whether you have dug deeply enough to find that connection.
So we have just a little bit more time left for a few more questions from the audience. From Damar, has there ever been a time when you doubted yourself or wanted to quit writing?
Oh, for as much as we've all talked about, like, oh, the more you write, the more you practice, the more you build up those writing muscles, the easier it gets. That said, every time I start a new book, I have no idea how I've done this before. It's like, sometimes it just feels like, oh gosh, like I can't believe I have written 4 novels that are going to be published, and I'll never do another one. But it's that ability to keep sitting down and keep just hacking away at it until it works, and just having the confidence that yes, if I keep working on it, I'll get it there.
I feel like I should address this because it is such an important question. I mean, writers are sensitive, and sensitive people make the world go round. They do things that other people don't, and they see things that other people don't. And so many sensitive people deal with a feeling of self-doubt. And what my advice to writers is when they are encountering that is twofold. We talk a lot about being special. We tell kids that they are special, but I think we're using the wrong word. All of our childhood in contemporary America, we focus on telling kids they are special. We don't really mean the word special. We mean the word appreciated, because when you say special, we can create an expectation that we are going to be singled out. We're going to get the lead in the school pageant. We're going to be picked first on the school team. We're going to be valedictorian. Not every kid will have that experience. There are other things that you can contribute as a person and as a writer that are very valid. So stop worrying about being special. It's more important to be good than it is to be special. And I would look at that. What kind of heart are you bringing to your book? Even if it's a book that, even if it's a concept that you don't think is all that special, if you are bringing the best in you, the biggest part of your heart, you're going to be writing something worthwhile. So that's the first thing. It's more important to be good than it is to be special. Stop worrying about the word special. It's not that special. The second thing is, I really am a big believer in enthusiasm and joy. I think that enthusiasm and joy are infectious and contagious and self-fulfilling. So you might be writing something that you don't think is all that great, but if you're having a blast, that is armor against all of that self-doubt. Because even if nobody else likes this, you are having the best time and you are enjoying yourself, you're being fulfilled. That is not only going to protect you from the doubt that comes from within yourself and the doubt that the world will heap on you, it's also probably going to show up in your writing. I'm going to disagree with you, Sherry. I think that I'm not going to entirely disagree. I think that sometimes you can just put in the elbow grease and make a great novel, but I also think that usually if you are having a blast writing this, that also shows. So I'm not entirely disagreeing with what Sherry says. Lean into the joy. As Mary was saying before, the things that you are obsessed with, that you love thinking about, lean into that and don't worry about all the other stuff, because your joy matters more than anything, and your joy is probably going to show up on the page and help other people love your book as well.
Oh, you didn't disagree with me at all, Henry, because what I said wasn't that your joy won't show through. When you love writing a book, your joy will show through. I'm just saying your hatred doesn't have to show through.
Right.
And I've always felt that what is failure for a book is what you decide it is, in a sense, because especially if you're an aspiring writer, you have not failed. In real life, okay, so in real life, moving from genre to genre is actually a little difficult, because when you have built up an audience in one genre and you want to go to another genre, you're kind of starting out your career from scratch in a way. You're building, you're giving up on what you've done before. But the thing is, before I moved from romance, where I was doing pretty okay, to mystery, I never asked myself, could I write a mystery? I actually signed that contract before I have ever, written a mystery. And my idea is that, well, I have not failed writing a mystery yet. I have not failed yet. So I'm going to keep going until I fail. And what is failure in a book? Words are the most abundant substance in the universe. It is not, it's not hydrogen or whatnot. We've been on the internet. We all know words are the most abundant, most inexhaustible resource in the entire universe. You can always get more words. There's no end to them. So the thing to do is just not to get too attached to your words. Be committed to your story. Be committed to a good execution of your story. Don't get too attached to specific words. When you throw out words, when you say these words don't work, good. You have actually, you're one step closer to success, because now you know what doesn't work. One thing that doesn't work. And if you go in another direction and it still doesn't work, you are yet again one step closer to success, because you have eliminated something else that doesn't work. So, think positive and don't think too much about what happens when things don't work. Prepare for what happens when things do work. Because writing is one of those careers where you actually cannot prepare yourself too much for what happens.
Thank you. We actually have a few questions left, which we are not going to be able to get to in our hour time frame. Thank you so much for everybody. This conversation has been so illuminating and so wonderful to hear all of you authors talk about your craft and your work. So I wanted to we're going to sign off now because we're at our hour time limit. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Henry, Leanne, and Mary Mccoy, and Sherry Thomas, for sharing your wisdom and your experience on writing and genre. Thank you again to the Library Foundation and the Lenore F. and Bernard A. Greenberg Fund. Everybody out there watching, please don't forget that there are amazing programs happening here on the Los Angeles Public Library's main feed most weekdays. Next week's Teen NaNoWriMo program will be the Teens Only Writers Chill Day, led by the awesome and amazing Emily from Palms Rancho Park. If you're a teen writer and you don't already have the Zoom link, please write to teens@lapl.org from your school email address to request it. Homeschoolers, put NaNoWriMo and homeschool in the subject line, and we'll make sure to hook you up with that link too. Then the week after next, November 30th, that's our NaNoWriMo wrap up. It's the last day of November. We're meeting at 4 p.m. instead of 3 p.m. We'll be back to streaming on the Los Angeles Public Library and YouTube main feeds. We'll be wrapping up NaNoWriMo with writers' resources for editing and self-publishing with Krista from the Library, Central Library Literature and Fiction Department. And we'll talk about, with publishing industry professionals like agents, editors, and publishers, talk about how manuscripts become published books. Thank you again to all of our guests, and thank you everybody for watching.